Mother-in-law.
Mother, how's she doing?
She came out, she's in recovery now.
Okay.
Yeah.
She likes this on your market.
Yep.
She is jujitsu looking position and
Yeah, that's what we were telling her. Yeah, once it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going, trying to walk fast here? Look.
Good evening, everyone. Glad you are with us tonight. We've got the Conway Wampus Cat girls basketball team that are our new state champions. We're going to recognize them here shortly. But we always precede each council meeting with a word of prayer and pledge of allegiance. If you'd like to, please feel free to join us. Would you bow, please? Father in heaven, thank you for your grace, your mercy, your goodness, and that you're the sovereign God. Thank you for your awesome power. Pray for our decisions tonight.
And pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Ms. Tucker?
Here.
Ms. Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Here.
Ms. Webb? Ms. Webb?
Oh,
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
here.
Ms. Isby?
Here.
Is this the same thing we got before? No? It is.
Yes, that's the same
It
one.
is.
That's for
It
Oak
is.
Street, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
You
same.
went to it?
That's the Oak Street corridor. Yeah.
Because I needed one, because I might have lost it. What'd you say?
He had an extra copy, so he
Oh, I thought you were trying to say I needed one because I lost mine.
Next up, we have our minutes from March 14th, 2023. Any comments, corrections, or changes?
Make a motion for approval as submitted. Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. And Mr. Winningham, before we start with our monthly financials, there's a group here we'd like to recognize tonight. We have the coaches and the ladies of the largest classification in the state of Arkansas. 6A, is that correct, lady? basketball champions in the state of Arkansas. They have done a tremendous job this year as a team, but they have represented Conway High School, themselves, their families, and the city of Conway. Just ladies, y'all have just done a tremendous job. Miss Isby would call and give me a rundown after every game of what she saw and who played what. And so I got after every game, I got a 15-minute call from Sheila telling me what she did. Mr. Hawkins, he does play-by-play for the Wampus Cat football. I think everyone here, for the most part, is an old Wampus Cat or has something to do with Wampus Cat. So, ladies, I'm going to read a proclamation to you, and I'd like to ask the whole council to come up and get our picture with them, and Mike and Charles. Yes.
Do they know they gotta, each one of them gotta speak for 3 minutes before they say?
Or one of you can sing the national anthem. Anyway.
Like, no.
I told Clardy when I got out of college, I sent an application in to Stanford, and they just sent back a big thing that said, "Ha ha." Proclamation for the Lady Wampus Cat basketball team, Class 6A state champions. Whereas the 2023 Wampus Cats won the 6A state championship, and whereas the Lady Wampus Cats basketball team finished #1 in the state, and whereas the Lady Wampus Cat basketball team finished in the top 25 national ranking, and whereas the team had a season record of 28-5 for the season, and whereas the team consists of 3 all-state players, Alexis Cox, Savannah Cox, and Chloe Clardy, whereas all conference players were Alexis Cox, Savannah Cox, Chloe Clardy, Camille Brown, Samaya Jordan, Emery Bohannon, and Caden Beckworth. My. How many of y'all are coming back next year? Oh, yeah, Coach. Yeah, Coach, you got it going on. All tournament players were Alexis Cox, Savannah Cox, and Chloe Clardy. And whereas in the state tournament, Conway defeated Fayetteville and Little Rock Central to secure a spot in the championship game against North Little Rock. And whereas on March 10th, 2023, at the bank of OZK Arena in Hot Springs, the Conway High School Lady Wampus Cat basketball team defeated North Little Rock with a score of 62-53. Ladies, you could have let them play a little closer. Come on. Becoming state champions. And whereas Conway Wampus Cat basketball coaches are Ashley Uscraft and LaShanta Johnson. Now, therefore, I, Bart Casper, Mayor of City of Conway, do hereby congratulate and acknowledge all the achievements of the 2023 6A state champions, Conway High School Lady Wampus Cats basketball team. And Coach, you and your assistant coach, y'all have been a tremendous asset to our city and our state and your families and your schools. And we all appreciate it. I want the whole council to come up here. I have got to let Sheila and Andy come up here. Mr. Ledbetter, he's no Wampus Cat. So y'all, ladies, come on up here.
I got no words.
Mr. Mayor, I do know that the Conway Lady Wampus Cat basketball team was in Little Rock today to be honored, but they have a lot more fans in here in this room tonight than they had in Little Rock, I can promise you.
Let me go to the back.
Everybody see the camera? All right. Look at Mr. Franklin. Let him give us something to smile at. Hey, Frank, send me one of those. I don't have my camera. See around in here.
He was.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you. You bet.
That's a good point.
See, I would have been mad at myself if I was come to that meeting instead of my.
Hey, we're having an adult conversation here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, his dad jokes. I couldn't understand what you're saying. Grandpa jokes.
All I said is,
That's right.
okay, let's get back to business. That was fun.
Garrett, you should have stood up during those pictures.
He was.
It's not as tall as you, Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Winningham.
He was standing.
Give us something good, Mr. Winningham.
I'll do my best. Good evening, council. We've got February 2023 financials to look at this evening. First page, we have the general fund revenues and expenditures. Our largest revenue source in the general fund and in the city in whole is the sales tax. And for February, we were about as flat can be. You can see we collected in the general fund $2,758,000 in February, and in February 22 we collected $2,734,000. So it was very, very slightly to the positive, but you can pretty much call that flat.
Mm-hmm.
You can see our bottom line is still looking pretty good. We've got a net revenue of $1.6 million through February, and I think that's because of our expenditures. You can see compared to budget, we're only at 11% spent, whereas we've collected about 15% of our total revenues. I think that's what's causing our bottom line to still show a positive number. Is we've still got the spending freeze in effect that the mayor put in first of the year, and not only that, I think our department heads just do a great job of only buying things they need, and we've got the purchasing department now that really makes sure that we're not spending too much for any item or service or anything. So I think that really has a lot to do with it. The only other thing I had to mention, and it's pretty much the same thing in street fund as well, expenditures are very low. In the sanitation fund, it doesn't look that great, but if you'll notice in the revenue section, we don't have any revenue shown there for our sanitation fees for the month, and that's just simply a timing issue. When you see the March financials, you should see that caught back up, and everything should be fine. So nothing to be alarmed about there in the sanitation fund.
Nothing to see here.
Sir?
Nothing to see here.
That's right. Yeah,
Keep
move
on.
along. Move
Keep
along.
on.
And that's all I've got, Mayor, unless anybody has any questions or comments.
I know it's flat, man, but that's better than being negative. So
Exactly.
I'll take it. Or should I say I'll take it?
And I saw you made the transfers for the non-uniform pension. So, out of the fund balance.
That's not shown, well, yes,
And out of the fund balance.
yes,
Not
correct.
in the
Yeah. We
financial statement.
And we have made the actual transfer now. So you'll see that reflected in March as well.
Make a motion for approval of the financials. Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the financials. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
That's a 7-0. Next up, we have community development. Mr. Hawkins, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item is a resolution requesting that the Faulkner County Tax Collector place a lien on a property at 920 Garland Street for expenses incurred by the city of Conway. We spent $162.03 getting things up to code, and we have a resolution to be read for. First of all, is there a owner or representative of an owner of 920 Garland Street with us this evening? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anybody stepping forward, so now we have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R23
16.
16. Thank you. I'll take a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution, placing a lien on property located at 920 Garland, in the amount of 16203. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to approve the Oak Street Corridor Plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and we have a resolution to read for this. Chris, would you like to talk about this? You kind of settled over there.
I don't move forward
I
until I'm
thought you
told
were
to.
coming. Come on.
Mayor and Council, on March 13th, the Oak Street Ahead project was brought by staff to the Planning Commission with recommendation to forward to the City Council. The Planning Commission forwarded the plan to the City Council with a unanimous recommendation of approval to be heard at this meeting. The Oak Street Ahead plan has been extensively vetted by the Planning Commission, council members, staff, and numerous stakeholders. This includes the steering committee, which was formed in February of 2022, including the chamber, local owners and representatives, developers, the University of Central Arkansas administration, Conway Corporation, planning commissioners, and the city council members. Approval of this resolution would allow the Planning and Development Division to take appropriate considerations as part of the comprehensive plan for new development within this corridor.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution R23017. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution for the Oak Street Corridor Plan. Any further discussion?
No discussion, but just a comment. I think it behooves us to recognize and thank all of those that worked diligently on this
Yeah.
plan.
I agree. Thank you, Ms. Isman.
Mhm.
Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve a conditional use permit to allow an extermination service in an O1 zone for property located at 783 Diane Lane. And this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on March 13th. And at that time, the commission voted 7-0 that the request be forwarded to City Council with a recommendation of approval. We have a resolution to read for this item. No, we don't have a resolution. I'm sorry. We're just approving a conditional use permit.
Mr. Paxton.
This is a request for an extermination service in an O1 zoning district for property located at 783 Diane Lane. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with the conditions as provided to the council.
Make a motion for the adoption of the conditional use with the 8 conditions listed. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. I'm sorry, this conditional use permit for the property on Diane Lane with the 8 exceptions. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property at 4106 Prince Street. It's currently zoned R1. The requested zoning is a C3, and this appears to me to be a cleaning up of a situation that has been out there for a number of years. I think going back to 1988, I believe is what it said, that they've been operating this as a commercial venture. That's 25 years, if my math, no, it's longer than that. 35 years, thank you. Man, my math is not good. 35 years, and I'm assuming at this point that what triggered this was a request to do something on this piece of property. Chris, would that be correct?
So initially, yes, this was at this property. There was initially a request to do a remodel. I do have a full presentation ready for the council on this item. There was some complex issues when it went through the Planning Commission related to the rezone and some of the considerations thereof. So with the permission of the mayor and the council, I can present a presentation for the rezone of 4106 Prince Street.
You got the mic, man.
Fine with me, Chris.
If I can get the IT to work.
It's usually my line.
Like the record show, I did test this earlier and it worked just fine.
It is a rather complex issue, how we got to this point.
Yeah, it's yeah, pretty complex to get back to it.
I need to go get one of my grandkids to do that for you.
I was saying the same thing.
Sometimes you just have to start over. I started it over, it worked. So let's see if I can get this moving forward. So this was an ordinance to rezone parcel that had previously gone to the Planning Commission. The location of this is a 0.1 acre lot, approximate. It's the south 4,185 square feet of lot 93 of Mallard's Crossing subdivision. You can see just the area for this rezone is shown with the yellow line on the graphic. The item was originally heard on October 17th at the Planning Commission and was tabled to the November meeting. The item was tabled in order to allow the applicant to consider other zoning options. However, the applicant originally withdrew this request after the public hearing. This was completed through an email to staff on November the 15th after the Planning Commission meeting in October. The director, myself, have requested this item to be heard by the council for further consideration. So a summary of the owner's input for this item. The properties have been owned by one owner since 1994 to support the primary structure to the south. The applicant states that the request is brought forward as follows. The owner is combining the lots and is taking this action to clean up the zoning associated with the two lots. The applicant is not currently planning to make any changes to this. There were some remodeling and some changes to the fencing area behind it, but as far as the overall site, it's going to have a similar use. This is simply being brought forward to bring it in compliance with the primary structure. The use of the 0.1 acre lot has been, you'll notice I struck out the word legal. It's just a non-conforming use since 1994. That's going to change from the packet that you were provided. The owner, Mr. Hamley, the current property owner, stated that their business is a consulting business and that there are no local clients for their business. The owner states that they are moving to the West Conway in this space, and it is worth noting that since that time, since those comments were made at the public hearing, that the owner has moved into this space after receiving a certificate of occupancy for the site development review. The owner stated also that C3 is just being pursued for the cohesive zoning for the site. The contractor for the site also spoke at the public hearing meeting and discussed that this was just the back of the lot and not the full lot. So once again, you can see that the back of the lot has the yellow area around the perimeter of it. The lot at the corner of Teal and Prince is the rest of the property that has the common ownership. The contractor also discussed that the owner wanted to improve aesthetics with landscaping in conjunction with their remodel. It is worth noting that the remodel has been completed at this time. We'll show you a picture of the remodel later on in this presentation, which is also not a part of your packet that you were provided, but I took some photos at 2:30 this afternoon and I wanted to show you the most recent version. So the public hearing was held. It was held at the October Planning Commission with the following concerns being brought forward to the Planning Commission. Mr. South at 803 Teal Drive addressed concerns that this is a 30-year-old issue related to covenants, that the driveway would be used for commercial structure, that a restaurant with a drive-through would be allowed, that the existing zoning is a buffer, and that requested a separate zoning option such as O3. Mr. Ledbetter at 805 Teal Drive also stated that they had trouble with traffic from other surrounding C3 uses and supported an O3 zoning as well. As far as the Planning Commission, they did express some concerns. First, they asked the staff about a traffic impact and were advised that there were no additional traffic impact considerations because the use was not changing. This was a rezone, not a development. Concerns regarding the future uses of this property were also discussed by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission has expressed concerns related to their inability to, some of their inabilities, we'll get to that in a minute. First, they were informed that during future redevelopment, it would be subject to, this site would be subject to a site development review, with considerations of things such as buffering, et cetera. Concerns about the whole property instead of just the 0.1 acre lot, but also to include the 0.56 acres to the south. And issues related to development were also discussed by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission discussed an inability to limit access to the driveway, but could not create conditions of approval because this was a rezoning request, not a site development review. They also discussed an inability to require barriers and buffers during the rezone process, and were informed by staff that this was also handled during development review, not during the rezoning. They were also informed at the meeting that the covenants are not enforced by the city, but those are agreements that are between the property owners. Some of the staff comments that were related to this, there was a public hearing in October of 2022. The important part of that is that there's been no changes from the original requests. This item was initially failed by a lack of required votes, 5 in favor and 3 against. It required 6 to pass. However, the chair had voted to deny in order to allow the item to be expunged and tabled. So the vote was properly expunged by the Planning Commission pursuant to their bylaws with a motion from the majority. The item was then tabled until the November meeting. Some public input included using the existing zoning as a buffer between C3 and R1 to the north. However, this small lot, the intent of R1 zoning is not to restrict the use of land, but it is characterized by single-family homes on large lots, plus certain areas where similar residential development is likely to occur. The 0.1 acre parcel zoned R1 is neither intended as a buffer, nor would it be suitable as a large lot with a single-family home. Zoning districts do include buffering requirements that are built into these zones. C3 zoning requires a 12-foot building setback at the rear of the property and also a perimeter landscape of at least 20 feet to be provided along all property lines adjoining any residential area. This is where the code takes appropriate steps to ensure that the buffer exists between the residential and non-residential uses. Here you can see an image that was provided during the demolition of the driveway. The driveway was one of the issues that during the public comment, during the public hearing, the driveway was one of the issues that some of the local owners in that area had a concern with. Some of the history of this site, in 1989, the parcel was platted as a part of Lot 93 in Mallards. You can see in 1994 with the blue arrows, it was brought into one property owner and has remained with one property owner consistent since that time. This item would have been considered in the November 22 Planning Commission meeting. However, the applicant withdrew the request on November 15th in an email from Tyler Group. Here you can see where the application was withdrawn properly by Tyler Group with the authorization of the applicant. These images were taken today at about 2:30. The following images were taken and added to this presentation to show the current condition of the property. You see that they have completed a big portion of their remodel. The only thing that they're doing at this time is putting up the new fence. And they have received a certificate of occupancy at this location.
How tall is that fence?
I believe it's a 6-foot fence, and just a note, we have no regulations on fencing. So. Final comments, the applicant is requesting to rezone only the north portion of the overall property, being the 0.1 acre parcel from R1 to C3. The two parcels are being combined as a lot combination replat, which would otherwise have split zoning on one parcel. The property has been used as a storage area since approximately 2007 and is considered a non-conforming use. I'll note that I took the word legal out of that again. The applicant is not proposing any expansion of the commercial use at the primary structure at this time. While the zoning change is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, it has had a common ownership since 1994, and the request is likely not to cause a negative impact for adjacent property and will resolve the non-conforming nature of the established use. Restrictive covenants are not dealt with by the city of Conway. They're through the HOAs. That was one thing that we just wanted to reiterate. This project had received that certificate of occupancy, and the lot combination is not tied to a rezone. The lots can still be combined without the rezone being approved, and it would just be a split zoning. The recommendation from staff at this time is the approval of the request as it will allow appropriate use of the property by resolving non-conforming nature of the established use, and staff recommends approval of the ordinance. I'll stand for any questions.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Chris, for presenting it like this. That was nice.
I'm telling you, I've been here a while. That's the first time I've seen something like this. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Council, Chris?
Start over because I missed part of it.
I can start.
No, thanks, man.
May or may not allow that.
I didn't say anything he said.
Mr. Ledbetter, do you have a
I'd like to say that I'll be recusing from this since it's in my neighborhood. And the property owners that were, I don't think Ben's here tonight, but never was it a question about the occupant that's going in there. We were concerned about the future of it.
Sure.
The next time.
Yeah.
Is what we were concerned about.
So
Rightfully
that's
so.
my question. If Chris moves out of there for whatever reason, and somebody does want to put something that fits in the C3, it'll still be subject to site overview and all that, and
That is correct. Will still be required to conform to the C3 standards and would still be required to go through the site development review if it meets those requirements. So.
okay. And at that point, you can require buffering and that sort of thing.
That's where the requirements of the C3 buffering would come into play. That's correct.
Well, they don't come into effect now.
That is correct. The project currently that was presented and has a certificate of occupancy is beyond the certificate of occupancy, so it would not be a requirement with this type of a project. No, not with a remodel. If it would, for example, if someone brought a new business in there and wanted to add additional buildings or anything that would trigger a site development review would have to come into the requirements of the C3 zoning district.
Well, how was the certificate of occupancy moved forward without any action from
Sure.
planning commission or council?
Whenever the site development review process is an internal staff review process, it just has to meet the requirements of the code. So after it meets the requirements of the code, then it receives a certificate of occupancy.
The only thing that was holding it up was a sidewalk issue that they finally got resolved.
That's correct.
Yeah,
On the
that's correct.
development side of the house, and this is a rezone, and I'll just remind everyone, the rezone is separate from the development portion. They tried to bring forward the rezone. I think that there was some questions tied to the development specifically, but the question at hand is it an appropriate zoning district? During the SDR, the site development review process, there were questions about the sidewalks and other things that were worked out with staff.
We're talking about an area smaller than the interior of this room.
That's correct.
One tenth of an acre.
You can
is a lot
see-
less than the size of this
If you look at the orange fence that's laying on the ground, you can see a discoloration in the grass.
Mhm.
It's approximately to the 4th pole. Right around in that area, I believe, is the property line. The area that is currently zoned R1 is not suitable for development within the R1 district.
Folks that have been here a long time, when did Mallard Crossing go in?
Moved in 1990, and we were at the second house.
Somewhere I read this has been commercial property, that the building has been commercial property since 1988, is what I'm wanting to say. I might be wrong about that, Chris, and if I am, correct me. But there was commercial property there before y'all built houses.
No,
And-
it was a residence.
Was it?
when we built
Okay,
it,
okay.
yes.
I stand corrected on that.
Art, did James Johnson build that house? Can't remember either.
We're way out in the country then.
Yeah.
Dirt road.
It was. Yeah, it was. I mean, way out there. This is an area that is different from any area that I can think of where you have commercial immediately abutting a residential area.
Residential. That's what I can't believe, is that we've got a C3 that close to.
It's been that way for
For
years.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
It's that way on the other end. Up Hogan,
Mm-hmm.
same way.
Yeah, I guess it is. And yep. I think that because of the triggers that are involved with whatever happens down the line, if something else happens down the line, I think that changing this very small piece of property in commercial sliver would be appropriate at this point in time. And with that in mind, I would make a move that make a motion that grant this C3.
Second.
Have a
And
motion.
for the same reasons, Andy, plus all that's in place for any further development in that area as far as site overview as well.
Exactly.
Right, protections.
Exactly.
I don't know if I can say this. The neighbor that is closest, no, is in favor.
It
Got
is
a
in favor.
text as well earlier.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got
Is in
the
favor.
same-
Is.
probably the same.
Mhm.
Is
text.
in favor of it.
That's the only thing I was wondering why no
Mhm.
one showed up for the meeting, so.
Yeah.
Must
be
okay with it.
She and I have had several conversations about it, and her and her husband.
Here, I got the same text.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone the property located there at 4106 Prince from R1 to C3, that small corner in the back. Any further discussion?
This is y'all's area, so now's the time to say
Oh,
something.
I'm out.
You're okay? Cindy? I
He
got
didn't
you.
say he was okay. Just-
Mr. Garrett?
The ordinance 023-6. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter? Tucker? Hawkins?
Yes.
Tisby?
Yes.
Passes 6-0 with one recusal. All right, Mr. Hawkins.
That's
Thank
what
you.
one-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris, thank you very much. I mean,
Yes,
I
thank
really,
you.
I
Thanks,
enjoy-
Chris.
I enjoyed.
Yeah, that was good. We got
I
another for
enjoyed
you.
And you're gonna
seeing
love the
that.
next one.
I watched
Hey.
the planning commission that night.
I giveth, will taketh away here in a minute.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see. Consideration to appeal the interpretation of subdivision code requiring sidewalk for property located at 2805 to 2830 Harbell Drive. And Chris, tell us all about this.
This is an appeal of the interpretation of the subdivision ordinance from the previous director of planning and development. I do have another presentation that I would like to present with the permission of the council and the mayor.
Come on.
That's
You
a-
didn't see it. We're gonna take one of
That's a
these
stall
all the time.
tactic, so I can figure out how to start this.
Hey, be careful, man, they be asking for it every meeting.
You're setting that bar pretty high.
Yeah, no kidding.
So to begin with, this is a 15.12 acre subdivision. It's 2805 to 2830 Harbell Drive in Crest Haven subdivision phase 4. The original request for this was the applicant is appealing the interpretation of the application of the subdivision regulations, specifically Article 5, subsection 9, that applies to the requirements for sidewalks by the Director of Planning and Development. The Planning Commission did hear this item on March 13th and had concerns for inconsistent application of the subdivision code. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward this to the City Council for further review. On March 13th, an appeal of the interpretation of the subdivision code was heard by the Planning Commission, and the code requires the sidewalks to be constructed with the new subdivision development. The code specifically states, quote, "Sidewalks shall be constructed within any subdivision in accordance with these regulations," end quote. Section 9.10 provides a route forward that a waiver may be requested and lists factors to determine if a waiver may or may not be granted. One of these factors is the existence of a sidewalk network in the immediate area. The options for this development per the subdivision code are either to construct the sidewalk or to pay a fee in lieu because of the factor that there is not a sidewalk network in the immediate area. Section 9.10.g is written as follows: that if a waiver is granted, the subdivision developer shall contribute funds in lieu of sidewalk construction equal to 4-year rolling average of the weighted average amount of the concrete walks in the 4 most recent editions of the RDOT weighted average unit prices. This in lieu fee shall be subject to a maximum fee equivalent to 150 feet of street frontage per lot for lots intended for single-family or two-family dwelling uses. There shall be no, I'll add the word be, there shall be no maximum fee for lots containing or intended for containing or intended for other uses. In July of 2022, there was a policy update. Prior to this date, the permitting staff, and this was an internal policy with the administration. Prior to this date, permitting staff reviewed these requirements. After this date, the planning staff began to assist the permitting staff by providing additional review in the workflow to provide additional oversight in the process. This is because there were identified issues within the administration that needed to be resolved with this process. There were known issues with the original process, which have since been addressed through policy changes. In addition to these changes, the new planning director is working on further policy changes in conjunction with permitting to solidify process and reduce administrative errors in the future. The previous policy issues resulted in 2 lots that received a certificate of occupancy without properly being assessed fees. Through the new process, there was a review by planning staff through the workflow. Due to the sidewalks not being constructed, the previous director provided the applicant with an email on December the 9th clarifying the requirements of the code. A summary of the previous director's determination includes the previous director provided a direct interpretation on December 9th, 2022 that sidewalks are required, that the applicant was previously given notice on October 29th, 2019 as a part of the preliminary plat process that reflect the requirement to build sidewalks as a part of the typical street section. It establishes that item 10 of section 9 would, would allow the applicant to either build the sidewalk or a waiver could be granted in this case, which still requires a fee in lieu. The subdivision regulations do not provide alternative waiver options. The applicant appealed this decision and stated that fees in lieu were not assessed at the time of permitting. It is noted that code requires sidewalks to be built prior to the final inspection and issuance of a certificate of occupancy, not during time of permitting. Mr. Longing stated that the sidewalk and fees were not required on the first 2 homes and therefore did not quote the in lieu fees to other contracts. Sidewalks were required to be constructed by the homeowner and home builder per code, but neither were installed nor were fees assessed for the first 2 lots prior to the certificate of occupancy. This was an administrative error, not a waiver of the requirement. The applicant's requirement was not on the approved and signed plat. It is noted that the typical street section TS3 states the requirement, as does section 9.10 of the code. A comment was provided by engineering on October the 29th, 2019. On the left, you can see the red circle that shows the requirement on the typical section for the TS3. And on the right, you can see the list of comments that was provided on October 29th, 2019. The appeal process is defined that the applicant was provided an appeal route, which is defined in section 9 as being the City of Conway's Planning Commission. Actions of the Director of Planning and Development may be appealed to the Planning Commission. However, the code does not provide guidance on further actions. Some considerations in this is 1, having not received the invoice for the first 2 lots, Mr. Longing states that he did not incorporate fees into the next 5 home builds. Mr. Longing states that currently there are 2 homes that have been built, 5 under contract, and 5 lots that are not under contract. Mr. Longing also expressed concerns of adverse impact in which the determination has caused to his clients due to previous administration billing errors. It was not within the authority of the Planning Commission to waive the requirements of the code in full. The Planning Commission forwarded the City Council for further consideration. With additional options, the current Director of Planning and Development believes that there are 3 possible actions that the City Council may take on this item. Action item number 1, the option number 1, is that the city council may uphold the interpretation of the director of planning and development and require the developer to construct sidewalks at these locations with an option to allow the applicant to request a waiver with fees in lieu. This would result in requiring construction of the sidewalks or fees in lieu for 5 homes currently under contract and the remaining 5 homes. The 2 homes that were built would not be subject to this requirement because they have already been issued certificates of occupancy. Bottom, you can see a chart that shows some of the costs. 2 completed homes at that time, that are not owed by the developer is $9,354. 5 homes under contract for 2022 rates. With option 1, it would be owed by the developer, and that's $23,385. And in the future, based on 2023 rates, with the future 5 lots, $25,792.50. It is noted that those rates would be adjusted based on the time of the build. City council may either uphold or, for option 2, action item in option 2, the city council may either uphold or deny the interpretation of the director of planning and development and waive the requirement of the developer to construct or pay fees in lieu for the 5 homes that are currently under contract and refund any fees in lieu which were paid by the developer to achieve a certificate of occupancy upon the city receiving a copy of each contract. This is a recommendation from the current director of planning and development. This would mitigate the adverse impact from the current clients already under contract, and it would not establish a precedent moving forward for other similar developments while addressing the invoicing error. You can see the change in the chart below. That would waive $23,385 by the city council. Action item option number 3, the city council may either uphold or deny the interpretation of the director of planning and waive the requirement for the developer to construct or pay fees in lieu for all lots in the subdivision and refund fees in lieu which were paid by the developer to achieve certificate of occupancy on the city receiving a copy of each contract. This would also mitigate the adverse impact on the current clients, but could potentially establish a precedence moving forward for other similar developments. You can see the recommendation on the bottom where it would waive the future builds that include the 5 lots without contract. Here you can see the location of the houses that are under contract, not under contract, and the 2 houses that are already built, and there are 4 possible recommendations for a motion. I stand for any questions.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
leave those in.
Yeah.
The termination of that street, of Harbell Street, on the left end, I guess that's the west end. Who's smart enough to know what's off the end of that? Is that going to be more houses built in there?
It's zoned R1, so I would assume it could be. The street appears to stub. I don't have an aerial image, I don't believe, of this development. There's currently a hammerhead at the end, which indicates that there's a possibility that it could be future development. I'm not sure what the terrain or the topography looks like, but it is zoned R1.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Hawkins.
No, I was just going to say, where are the sidewalks at this point in time in this subdivision? Do you have
That was
those
my
marked?
question.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Glowhaven Drive and Sunglow Drive, do they have, I haven't been out there. Do they
Troy,
have-
would you like to speak to some of this?
I don't think Crest Haven has.
I was
There's
gonna
a-
say
there's
Any
currently-
sidewalks in Crest Haven?
There is currently, in this subdivision, there are currently no sidewalks. So
I didn't think there
I've
were.
walked
Yeah.
it, I don't remember one.
Mm-mm,
Has
no.
everybody there paid the fees in lieu up to now?
the code requires for this development that it would either build the sidewalks. That's actually what the code states, that they have to build the sidewalks. Or they may request a waiver. If they request a waiver, then they have the option to pay the fee in lieu with that waiver. That is the option with the waiver.
How long has that been a thing? I mean,
That
like,
has-
everybody that's built out there, have they had to do one or the other?
I know that Hal, when he built out there, the developer, Hal did not pay the in lieu of, but the property owners
Built it
did.
into the contract.
Yeah.
I know
Right.
somebody
That's
did.
what
I
Yeah.
know we put
Yes.
this in because of that, because we was gonna use the money to build
Mhm.
sidewalks in other part of the city. we wasn't gonna make people do it, but they had to pay the fee for it to help us put sidewalks in other parts. I mean, if you don't want it, but that was the rule way back when, and that's the reason why we did it, because we
See, I
got,
think it happened maybe before I came on the council. It was like '06 or
I don't know, but I
what's
know
the
that's the
ordinance?
reason
It
why we
was-
did it.
There's,
Yeah.
uh,
That was before
It,
that.
it does state in the ordinance that if a development went through preliminary plat and the preliminary plat was approved prior to October the 31st, 2005, that those are exempt. So if the preliminary plat for a subdivision was approved, that's the construction drawings, not the final
Mhm.
plat.
so that
Then
was
that would
kind
be
of
the
the
cutoff.
Right.
I think the whole problem, while we're in this funk, is somebody waived it, which shouldn't have ever been waived.
So yeah, somebody
Because-
Somebody forgot to bill it.
yeah somebody
Yeah.
forgot to bill it.
That's what I'm saying, because I remember this from a long time ago, and that's why we did it, because we got some streets over here that we could use the money for the sidewalk, to put sidewalks that's going to these schools, and that's why we put that in there.
Well, and I don't
That's
know.
fine, but, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know how much has been under construction previously, but I know when we actually purchased our lot, we bought it from Richard Collins and subbed it all out and built it, and there was no requirement, but that's been,
50 years ago.
no, it hasn't been 50 years.
When was that?
Prob-
Over there.
It was, I
David Kelly
came
was
on
the
the
mayor.
council in 98. So it was 98, and we built there probably 2 years after that. Yeah,
So that would have
Right
been
in
before
2002.
that.
right.
Would've been before.
We refer to those as the legacy subdivisions. Those
Mhm.
legacy subdivisions October 31st, 2005 wouldn't have had the requirement. Some of the subdivisions have sidewalks just because they were built in.
Right.
But this sidewalk requirement that's currently as written, if it was pre that time period, then it wouldn't have been a requirement.
Right.
We didn't put that in just for this area here, we just put it in for developers anywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, because we
That is
needed the
correct.
money for the sidewalks, like over on Conway Boulevard and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Right.
Chris, I appreciate the fact that you've put in all of these alternatives, that we uphold the director's interpretation, because that was a correct interpretation. And I watched with great interest. I watched the planning commission that night, and I kept thinking, no, it's the right interpretation.
I think that
There's
that was
been
the
mistakes
challenge,
made, I
yes.
think, on the part of the city, but,
Mhm.
with this process.
And I think that the only appeal method that's written in code didn't have an option for the planning commission. I think that they recognized that and moved it forward to the city council to make this type of a decision, so.
And policies have been put in place so this does not happen again.
Yes, sir.
Your suggestion once again would be?
Option 2.
Waive.
Under contract on the.
Chris,
Just, I'm
Is
gonna say this.
Mr. Longing here? I'm just,
Yes.
I'm just curious, is this the only building he's done in Conway?
It's not.
Okay, so previous homes, did he pay?
He has
Did he
paid-
build the sidewalks or do the in lieu of?
He has paid them before.
Okay.
so Chris, when Mr. Longing turned in his subdivision plat for approval or whatever that's called, it should have been returned, and it looked like it was, and it said sidewalks or in lieu of fee. So I'm
So
curious as to why are we here? I mean, and it's a law or it's not. Right,
They do have the ability to appeal. The planning commission has the
Okay.
authority to appeal that,
right.
because that was a determination by the previous planning director. Mr. Longing appealed that decision, and the planning commission did want it addressed that there wasn't a consistent application of the code, so that's where the options came from. So
Okay, so
I will point out that the typical street section in the ordinance, the typical street section on the preliminary plat may be by reference, but it is something that we build to in the city of Conway.
okay. I talked to one of my friends that's been a longtime developer here in Conway, and I said, "What is this?" You know, it just sounds to me like it was one clerical error or one or two, and then after that, it's a law, and if you've been doing it for a while, you certainly be aware of it. Am I right? I mean,
Like I can pull up the other options as well. Just any of the options that you would like to see.
I think it should go by the rule, and that's why we put the rule in there. Bottom line, and it wouldn't be fair to charge the other people and not charge
Right.
the people that's already got a home there. It's just, at all.
The applicant is here, Mayor, if they wanted to have any questions for them.
Jacob, would you like to speak? You please state your name and address for the record. I know who you are, but just for the record. Thank you.
So basically, I try to keep it as short as possible. I submitted my plat with no sidewalk shown, and it was approved as such. My other subdivisions that I've done in Conway, we required to show sidewalk on the plat. So also at the time of platting, there were similar subdivisions on Round Mountain that were approved with no sidewalks. So I was under the impression that we weren't doing sidewalks as there were none located in Crest Haven. So I turned that in. I had it approved with no shown sidewalks. I permitted the first two houses. I built them through completion with no sidewalk in lieu fees, no sidewalks required. I then started two more homes, got those, near completion. And then I had additional homes under contract. I started a house for Dr. Caleb Dixon and his wife Heather. At that time, 2860 Harbell Drive was that address. At that time, I was billed an in lieu fee for that house. I've never paid an in lieu fee. I've never paid a sidewalk fee on Round Mountain. I have built houses around on Impey Trail, Mountain Park. I've built other houses in Crest Haven. I've never been required to pay those fees there. I think some of those were likely also by clerical error. So it led me to believe that there were no sidewalk requirements there. So once I permitted 2860 Harbell, I called planning. I said, "Hey, I think there may be a mistake here. I've never done any of these in lieu fees or sidewalk requirements on Round Mountain." They told me that, well, we've made some mistakes. They are in fact due. And then they turned around and immediately started back billing me on builds that were nearly complete. So then that's when, and then I had additional houses that were under contract without sidewalks figured in, just like I didn't figure them in the other ones because they weren't required in the other homes that I built. And then that's when, it all came about, and they told me that I could file an appeal. So that's what I did with the Planning Commission, just so there will be, that way it's fair to my homeowners that they don't owe these fees that, that weren't required, I guess, ever before for me or any of my clients on Round Mountain.
Okay, since I got this stirred up, first of all, we're not blaming you at all for this, man.
Right.
And it's not just Round Mountain that is required for it. It's
Right.
supposed to be in Conway, period.
Right.
And so we're not trying to punish you for not doing or your homeowners. That was just the reason why we put it in there. And it's not your fault. I'm not
Right.
going to throw blame on whose fault it is.
Right.
But that's just, I remember when we did that, that's why we did it.
Right. But at this point, there's legal contracts without sidewalks that I have out there. So, I mean, I guess, I don't really know where that puts us, but, it's going to be a bit complicated, I guess.
I think it'd be crazy to put sidewalks out there right now because there are no sidewalks anywhere else.
I'm not suggesting that at all.
But
We have the in lieu.
Mr. Longy, have you paid in lieu fees at other
locations that you built in
I've
Conway?
paid one on, over on, the elementary school with the blue top,
Simon Elementary.
yeah, over off of German Lane. I
Okay.
paid in lieu fee for that along the road because y'all were gonna put in the sidewalks there for the kids, but I don't know if that's ever happened, but anyways, but that's the only in lieu fee I've ever paid in Conway. I do, I typically build the sidewalks because you can build them for half the price. I mean, it'd be ridiculous to pay an in lieu fee when you can build them for half the price. That said, I've already got 2 houses there without sidewalks built, so to be uniform, you wouldn't want sidewalks, you wouldn't want to add them now. So you'd have them with and without. So instead of spending $2,500, now the homeowners would owe, $46.77 each, and it's just, it's kind of complicated at this point.
Can I ask the attorney something? Hello. Can we spread the debt out so it doesn't have to be so much at one time?
You talking about for the in lieu of fees? Yeah, I believe you can.
I mean, we want to work with them and the homeowners too, but
I'm not aware of any requirement of the ordinance that would require payment at a certain time. I think the council could allow.
I mean, I'm for working with people, but we don't want to set a precedent of this happening again. And not, like I said, we're not blaming you at all.
Unfortunately, it's already been set with the first 2 homes and the permitting of 2 additional homes with no in lieu fees charged. So, we can say that it's not been, but I think clearly here it has been. Now, I'm not
No,
saying
that's not
that,
what I'm saying. I'm talking about us waiving the fee. We
Right.
don't want to start precedent with just saying if you didn't do it, we're not going to,
Right.
because that could be, it's just like the place out there that build the buildings out there that nobody caught out there off of South Dunnigan.
South Donaghy.
See, we had that problem and somebody wasn't supposed to build a building and we go out there and find out they got buildings up. See, we need to get more on top of stuff like this. That's just.
Let me ask the council this, and Jacob, see if this might work for you. And I don't know if we can do this legally. It's probably for Mr. Finkenbinder. If you say you can build the sidewalks for half the cost in lieu of,
that's correct.
what if the council went with whatever the cost of an actual build would be versus the in lieu of on this job?
For all the lots?
No, we've got some waived there.
About the ones that
All
are
but
under,
2 lots?
No,
under contract.
the ones that are built and the ones that are under contract, not the ones that are built, the ones that
The
are.
ones that are with that have not, we don't have a contract on yet, I say leave those as they are. I mean, he
Yeah,
can
and that's
do
Okay.
that's
that.
completely
Okay,
reasonable.
so what about on the others, the other 7 that we
I can go with you.
we lower it to the price of what you could actually build one for,
I'm good with that.
which would basically cut it in half?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have a hard time speaking for my clients, unfortunately, because they're the ones who are going to be paying the bill, not me. So, I guess I don't know where we stand on that.
And that's
At
fair.
this
I'm gonna tell
time,
you,
I
I've
mean-
been in retail and service industry, insurance industry for a long time, and if you screw up, you eat it.
Yes, you do.
That's just what you do. When,
You can't pass that mistake along to your clients.
I don't
It's-
like it, but it's $23,000, and I say we waive it. We waive
23.
the 23 and the 93.
And
and-
hold fast to the future ones.
I'm
I
good
don't
with
wanna-
that.
I don't want to waive something that doesn't have a contract.
Which we're all in agreement. Those would clearly be put in the contract up front, so there would be no,
Right.
there'd be no question on
I
that.
think there was an option 2 that our current.
That's
director-
option 2
That's
out
option
there.
2 there.
This is option 2, okay, yeah.
And that's the
Mhm.
one that you recommended, wasn't it, Chris? Thank you very much. So-
And like I said, they put processes in place that this will not happen again. And that's why I toss that out there, because I think this is on us.
Right.
That's why I was saying it's not his fault.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
not his
He
fault.
did nothing wrong.
And
The sidewalks that were just recently built on Hogan Road,
Hmm.
were those built from in lieu fees?
Yeah, from
Yes.
Matthews Meadows.
I mean, if I were doing this and that didn't get way, I'd build the sidewalks just
Just to
in front of
do
five
it.
houses. I mean, that's what I
Everybody
do.
say, everybody knows where Ann lives. She's on one of the sidewalk out there.
I mean, just to make, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
I just don't think it's their fault.
And I want to reinforce what Mr. Jones said. You know, the whole intent is to get safe sidewalks in the city limits. You know, that's why that's there. And and in Crest Haven, it's not appropriate because there aren't any other sidewalks. I wish there were, but there aren't. So
Got some pretty good sized drainage ditches in front of a lot of those houses.
yeah,
They run the length of the street.
exactly. So
See-
I actually would like to make a recommendation of option 2.
It's option 2 then. Well, let me say one other thing. I'm
Yes, sir.
for
Go ahead.
option 2, but I've had people calling me almost daily about sidewalks on East German Lane by Florence Madison. And that's what we, not this money. I mean, that's what
I've already
we-
paid for
Yeah.
those.
That's what I'm saying.
If you want
No,
to
what
go
I'm
through.
saying is,
Yeah.
that's what that's in place for.
Right.
And I'll go with option 2 too, but you see what I'm saying?
And following up on what you had asked me a while back, PD is
Oh, they doing
patrolling
that?
out there more. And Jacob and Kurt, have y'all moved the flashing signs out there yet, Kurt? Yes. Of school kids.
If we get some, that's another thing. I was just hit some stripes out there on the street,
Sure.
crossings.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
We also have my volunteers out there every morning.
Excuse me?
We also have my volunteers out there every morning.
You say you're out there in the morning?
I said my volunteers.
Oh.
I'm at a different elementary school.
I was gonna say, he can't be everywhere.
So we're going with option 2, is that right?
Yes.
That's this
That's
one.
the
That's the recommendation.
That's
That's the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve option 2 that's been presented by the planning director.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to also point out that this is an appeal, so we also need to add to that motion, if possible, to uphold or deny the director's interpretation.
Okay.
Yes, the full.
The director of
movie-
planning and
yes.
I mean, this one or the last one?
This one.
So move to
I'm
uphold
fine
the
with
director's
that.
interpretation
Of the
and approve
subdivision
option
code.
2.
Got it
Yes.
written out for us.
I can't see that far, Mr. Ledbetter. Would somebody read that for me? I can't read with the glasses either.
I move to uphold the director's interpretation of the subdivision code and approve option 2 as presented.
No, you second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for what Shelley just said. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
No.
Passes 6-1.
Enjoying your job, man?
Sir,
All right.
every day.
Thank you, Mr. Paxton. Good job, by the way. Mr. Hawkins. Nope. Next time, thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for the job
Done.
you've done tonight.
D-U-N, done.
You're getting lengthy on your stuff.
Hey, wasn't my fault. It's that new smart guy.
Smart guy.
Next up, we have public safety, and we will start. This is a ordinance appropriating insurance funds and waiving the competitive bid process for emergency repairs for district court. We have our director of the the physical plant up here, Mr. Clausen.
Evening. I'm here on behalf of District Court for this today. As you may know, in January, there was a flood due to some freezing pipes that damaged a large portion of District Court building. So I'm here to request the proceeds from the municipal property program along with additional $12,242.23 from the general fund to complete the emergency repairs to District Court.
The motion to approve the ordinance and the emergency clause if there is one.
Second.
Chris.
I have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Cleaned up?
It's getting that way. Yes, sir. We've got drying out and now we're just waiting on flooring and be put back in.
Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 02327. Ms. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Those both pass 7-0. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the fire chief. An ordinance appropriating insurance funds for the Conway Fire Department.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. We're requesting acceptance of a check for $696 from Municipal League Insurance to go towards some of the repairs on Engine 6.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 02328.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance for the Conway Fire Department. Any further discussion?
Is this still the one that got wrecked?
Well, this is a different one.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Miss Webb?
Aye.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Miss Tucker?
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Chief, just hold your spot there. Next up is ordinance appropriating funds for the Conway Fire Department. Tell us what you're doing here, Chief.
We received a check for $286.50 from proceeds from the ammo burner that we purchased a couple of years ago, and we're just asking for acceptance of that to go back in the fund so we can maintain that burner.
For adoption of the ordinance and emergency clause,
Second?
I have a
There is
motion and a
one.
second to, I'm sorry, Mr. Hawkins.
if there is one.
There's not.
There's
No,
There's not
emergency.
one on that.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance appropriating grant funds for the Homeland Security Grant Program for the Fire Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ordinance 02329. Miss Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Miss Webb?
Aye.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Did I get ahead of myself there, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now,
B4.
okay, I didn't find it. Ordinance appropriating funds for the weighing and competitive bids process for the grant received from Arkansas Department of Emergency Management. All right, now you're up, Chief.
Ready for that one? Okay. We received a grant from federal government for the bomb squad, and we're asking for acceptance of that. $186,330, and then followed that up with sole source fender for the Logos machine.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 02330.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Miss Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Miss Webb?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief. That's all the business we have tonight, Council. Before we leave, though, Mr. Ledbetter, did you say you built out there in 1990?
1990.
Well, I will,
Get a permit?
I'm sure Mr.
Pay for
Ledbetter,
sidewalks?
2009.
I'm sure Mr. Ledbetter was hoping I'd forget this, but I went out and helped him and two other guys put a lawn sprinkler in his new house. Worked all day in the heat, and when I left, he cooked those other two guys steaks, and I didn't get the invite. I have not forgotten that.
Lost in the mail.
And he had
Quit when the work
I
started.
make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Finkenbinder gave y'all all a copy of the.
You did.
Mhm.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.